got that cherry bomb.
Welcome to Breaking Beauty Podcast, Dr. Sheila. And I need to ask you about this because you were recently named one of the top 100 injectors in the USA. So I need to know how this comes about. Is there like a competition of sorts? And can I be a guinea pig?
With that one specifically, it was, I think, a nomination based. And this is a really good question because it's like, how do you find your provider, right? Are they on a top 100 injector list? This one I know I was nominated by one of the injectable companies.
Okay.
Because I'm their celebrity West Coast injector.
Okay.
And there are so many different vetting systems. That one's like a nomination one. There's one that I got nominated for recently, and this one's by peers, and it has a board, and it's called Castle Connolly or something like that.
Okay.
And then there's like super docs, and then now there's like actually companies that are vetting. They're like brokers for derms. Have you guys heard about that?
Yes, like Persona.
Yes.
Yeah, and like aesthetic. They're kind of like aesthetic concierges.
Yes.
Right.
So I guess you just have to see, is this like membership based? You have to be like pay to be part of this. And it can get really confusing, right? I mean, I always get super honored to get nominated for this stuff. But I think when it comes down to patients, kind of beyond that, it's like, look at the credentials, right? See how long they've been doing it. Look at the before and afters, but not so much like on Instagram or anything like that, because you guys know that.
Right. It can be edited.
Exactly.
Yes.
And see if you vibe, if you get into the place, always do a consultation first. And if things look a little off, red flaggy, maybe it is. If everything's very streamlined and everything's very like by the book and so organized, and it's easy to schedule, it's easy to get in touch with someone. If you have something afterwards, if you're bruising or something, and at my office, we have like a huge protocol to make sure it's not a intravascular occlusion, like filler's not in a big vessel. Those are the things people should really look for.
Okay. What's the name of the peer one? I'm interested in that.
Castle Connolly, top doctors.
Okay.
And I think there's a really rigorous process that goes into place, because I know I looked at it when I was just a few years out of practice, and I was still I didn't like meet the criteria. So I didn't really look into it anymore. And then I just received an email of top doctor. So I think that's really nice if someone wants to do that. I think being fellowship trained, especially in dermatology, of course. Dermatology, we get knowledge of cosmetics and we get knowledge of everything. Right. So if you want to talk about skincare a lot, don't go to a medical dermatologist who's only really working on complex like blistering diseases all the time, because they are their mind is a different focus. Exactly. Although all derms have that knowledge base of skincare, they're not going to sit down and talk to you about peptides and things on TikTok and things like that. I kind of do a little bit of all of it because I own the practice, but I think that that's another thing to look out for. If you want like the best of the best of the cosmetically trained, it's like ASDS fellowship trained in cosmetics, and there's like a fellowship after dermatology residency that we can pursue, and I did a double one.
Okay, well, we keep learning and we keep growing. Now, we wanted to talk to you today about how we age, because there was a study out of Stanford Medicine that was released this summer. It made a lot of headlines, and it suggests that there are two kind of bursts in our aging, and one of them happens at age 44 and the other one at 60. I'm curious if you see this theory reflected in your practice and what the takeaway of that news was for you. Did it resonate?
Yeah, I'm so glad you are bringing this up, because it was huge and it wasn't revolutionary. We kind of all know we don't age linearly. Especially after pregnancy, after a stressful time in your life, after med school, or we kind of have this accelerated aging process based on like stress in our life too. But this one was really specific. Of course, they couldn't control for stress in our lives or anything like that. And this is a really great study. So I know a lot of publications come out there, and my husband's an astrophysicist and PhD. So every time like we see studies, we're like, No, not a good
Yeah,
study.
right,
Not
right.
vetted, or this is like
Yes.
industry
Yes.
backed or something like that.
Yes.
This was Nature, which is
Yes.
the best, and it's actually open access. So if anyone wants to read it, they can.
Mm-hmm.
It gets really into the weeds. It's a really long paper, and it really gets into the science of it, almost like way beyond like what I understand with.
Cole's notes, please.
Yes, exactly. But essentially, this is a really great study because it was a cohort of like 108 people, which technically isn't that many, but for such a study that follows them for, I think it was like 6.8 years, almost 7 years, they took blood swab, skin swab, saliva swab, all of these things, and they saw these changes over time, and the two peaks were 44 and 60. And it's funny because I do see that in my office, even like without that study, because it's that perimenopausal.
I've said that too. I've
Yes.
said that even
Right.
from personal experience. I
Yes.
think a lot of people out there think that when they turn 40, their face is going to start changing because they're in their 40s now. But I noticed it when I hit mid 40,
Yeah.
and I was like, no, your face for me, everyone's different, obviously.
Right.
But when I was 40, I was like, I look the same, if not maybe a bit better, because of, you know, the in-depth skincare we do and the treatments. Like, I didn't notice a big difference at 40, but around 45, I was like, oh yeah, I
Yeah.
see it now. It's all falling.
And I think one takeaway, and I'll kind of talk about the study a little bit more, but I think one really good takeaway from this is that it's not in your head. It's not like you all of a sudden felt like you were aging, because there's science there to back it up. Because I do have patients coming in and they're like, oh my God, like, and then they feel like this is just going to be an accelerated aging process.
Right.
I think a lot of things are going to come from it, because what happened was, so for, you know, of course they looked at cardiovascular, they looked at how you metabolize carbohydrates and fatty acids, so that weight gain that we get as we mature, postmenopausal or what have you, is because of that decrease in muscle mass. It's because of how we metabolize things. So I think this is going to be really interesting, hopefully, to shift like the lifestyle aspect of everything, going in, getting screened if you have cardiovascular disease in your family, things like that. So I think as a whole, that was really important as a whole aging factor. But there was also the skin and the muscle. So they saw that for muscle, it decreases actually our muscle mass decreases as early as like 30 years old, and then 60 when it really goes down. So again, like going in, doing that like weight training and things like that, super important, especially for bones and osteoporosis. And then for skin, which is I think what we're really kind of interested in here for this conversation, they saw a dramatic decrease in what we call the extracellular matrix, which is our collagen, our elastin, and like our GAGs, glycoaminoglycans. So this is what gives structure to our skin. You know, we talk about the stimulation of collagen. You guys know all about that. And I think it's really interesting because as far as skincare is concerned, as far as in-office treatments are concerned, as far as at-home devices are concerned, like red light, things like that, we do really need to focus on that stimulation of collagen, because we lose, well, this wasn't in the study, but from what we know, we lose 1% of collagen production each year starting at the age of 20, and then 30% of our collagen like within 5 years of like menopause. So I think that now that we know this aspect, 44 and 60, I kind of already knew that in my office. I see a lot of, you know, people come in their 30s. Sometimes I hear like late 30, like for me, I feel like I kind of age like 35 plus. And I'm like near 40. So I feel like I'm kind of hitting that, but everyone's so different.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to bang on those two numbers. Like, all right, I'm not going to do anything until I age at 44.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
the prevention. And I think, like doing things like strength training, it's never a bad idea. And one thing that was interesting that I took away, because I was expecting perimenopause, I was expecting them to say women kind of fared worse because of perimenopause, but it wasn't the case. Trust me, I was ready to be like, patriarchy strikes again. But it wasn't. It was men and women equally at those ages
That
were
was so
affected.
interesting, yeah.
So it's like good to keep in mind.
I think for men, it would be interesting to kind of do a side. And I know there was like limitations in the study, it was like people around Stanford University. So it was like
Yes.
one very specific area,
Sure.
Northern Cal. Yeah.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
then another thing was decrease in testosterone in men, decrease in muscle loss, things like that. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that was just like the surface.
Yeah.
Right?
We could talk for a whole hour just about that
my
study.
gosh.
So what can we do beforehand to try to, now that we have this understanding of what's going to happen, how can we use that knowledge to prepare and mitigate, the effects of that the best that we can? What's your advice?
Yeah, I think that that's a great question. And first, like lifestyle, obviously, we all know that stress accelerates, that cortisol, and that increases like the breakdown of collagen. So decreasing stress, I know easier said than done. In my lifestyle, I'm on like adaptogens and things because I know I can't decrease like my career aspect.
Right.
And I have a doctor who does all of that and helps me with it, even though I feel like I've been doing my own healthcare forever. I feel like I needed someone else to run some of those labs, check my cortisol, do all of that. So you want to make sure your insides are good, right? And
Or
then-
Lexapro, guys. Adaptogens or Lexapro.
Yes.
We're both
100%.
equally fans over here.
Yes.
Saves me, I'll tell you that much.
Yes. I'm so glad you bring that up because the mind, it's all interrelated.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Exactly. It doesn't matter if you have a 10-step skincare routine.
Yeah,
If you're
my
mental
life's
and
falling
you're
apart, but
stressed.
my skin is glowing,
Yeah,
babe.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think that is so important. So what are some things at home and in office that we can do? So as we know, we're decreasing that collagen. Collagen, what gives our skin structure. Elasticity is what gives our skin bounce. And I know you guys are huge into skincare. Surprisingly, as a derm, I'm not really into skincare as much. I get so much sent to me, and I
Right.
have really sensitive skin. I have like a lot of allergies, and I'm acne prone.
Okay.
So I stick to like my few ingredients.
Just the basics.
The basics,
A lot of
right?
derms do, yeah.
Exactly. But I think that in the world of peptides, and of course, retinoids are amazing. They're kind of like the gold standard. Getting skincare down, I think, is really important initially. So, of course, SPF. Not even like dousing yourself all with sunscreen, but like sun protecting, wearing a hat, covering up, doing all that when you're like out and about is like super important. It adds up. Of course, skincare. And then in the world of in-office treatments, we have a lot of technologies that stimulate collagen. I know there's like some fear mongering and some other things regarding things that are like heat based and radio frequency based or ultrasound based that melt fat, but it's only deliberately melts fat when you're at those settings. I think that people really need to embrace these energy. Lasers are a huge part of everything. Botox and filler, I know we may talk about this, but like the fact that fillers are being vilified is, I think, sad because it does come into place as we age, because as we're aging, we lose fat, we lose those fat pads go down, we have bone resorption and muscle tone goes down. So I think it's focusing a lot on those things that stimulates collagen. There's a lot of injectables that stimulate collagen. Sculptra Hyperdilute Radiesse is going to be, I've been using it for years, but it's going to be actually approved later this year for stimulating collagen, which is really exciting for the neck, but it opens up the world for like so many other things. So I think it's really like problem based too, because even like Caucasian skin types age a little bit differently than darker skin types, and the collagen that's there, or the hair quality and the hair diameter. So I think it should be very like personalized.
Right.
What's the single best investment if you're to do one thing in your 30s?
Ooh, oh my gosh. Honestly, in your 30s, well, other than sun protection, I would say being on a retinoid.
Yeah.
You know, some people are like, oh my God, I was listening to another podcast and they were like, retinoid has such a good PR. I'm like, not really. It's just the gold standard. It has so much science behind it.
Yeah.
Of course, you can't be on it while you're pregnant. And there is some people that can't tolerate it. But at a very low dose, there's so many more formulations, even on the like aspect of prescriptions. Like there's a brand that's a prescription called Altrino, and it's a lotion, and it's very tolerable and has like collagen, glycerin, and I think it has hyaluronic acid. And this is prescription I can give patients, and they tolerate it really well.
Yeah.
And then just like starting off with like a retinol. But I think if you want to use one skincare product, it's not hyaluronic acid. Let me tell you, that's not anti-aging. It's going to just plump up your fine lines and pull in water. You want to do something that's actually stimulating collagen and boosting that cell turnover, and that's a retinoid.
Yeah, retinoid. And it's interesting you said peptides, because I do think that that's risen to popularity this year, even though it's not new at all. Right. Do you have a favorite peptide formula? That because that's not going to be by prescription, so give us something we can buy.
Yeah, peptides, I think the only thing about what's going to be difficult for that is good peptides are so expensive. So I think that unless they like mass are able to do something like that, they're near, I think good peptides are like over $100. So then these products are luxury products.
Yeah, they end up being expensive. Right? Yeah, there's a new one from SkinCeuticals that I really like that we've talked about, Botox.
Oh, yeah.
And it's supposed to be, I mean, I can't believe they're saying it, but it's supposed to be kind of Botox-ish in a bottle. And I'm I can't even imagine that SkinCeuticals is. Well, it's called Botox. Like, obviously, that's where they're going. Yeah. But it's not Botox in a bottle, guys. But it is a very good peptide serum. I have been using it. And it has a very gentle exfoliator in it, which I think is actually what gives you the glass skin effect and encourages you to keep using it. But yeah, it's going to be over $100.
Allies of Skin peptide is really good too.
That's really good.
Which one?
Allies of Skin.
Oh, okay. I've heard of that one.
And it's growth factors and multi-peptides in one serum. It's very unique in the market. It's like still expensive.
Medicate liquid peptides is quite good and more affordable.
Oh yeah. Heard
so
that
there's some recos. Now I want to ask you about, we know you're one of the top 100 injectors, so fair enough. A lot of, we've talked about filler fatigue this year. Is there anything in your opinion that has changed since when you started your practice and now in terms of your approach? Or what's your thought on this backlash?
I think that nothing really major has shifted because I'm not really like trend based in a way. You just have to go in to the patient individually. And if it's like, sometimes I'll use one syringe and do the entire face. Yeah. And like little micro droplets here and there just for like shadowing and things like that. And I think that, and then there's like another injector I saw who only takes patients if she's only doing like 7 syringes at once. And these are younger patients. These are like patients in their 30s. Oh my God. I know. And she like, that's her branding. That? Yes. It's like $12,000 or something
that's
like that.
insane. So filler is a lot more expensive than Botox. I don't know if people know that.
Right. Exactly. Typically. So for something like Botox, it's by units and it really depends on where you go. I would say anything under than like $10 unit is a little bit of a red flag.
I'm just going to ask you to pause for a second. So you know of somebody who will only take clients if they do 7 units minimum.
Oh, 7 syringes
of filler, meaning that this is kind of like I don't get out of bed for less than $5,000 a day kind of like mentality.
And I don't like know this person personally, but I saw that branding and the seminars they were doing online.
Wow.
And I was just blown away. I was like, this is bizarre to me.
I feel like this person needs to, I'm sorry, I'm like getting a reaction right now because I think that this person needs to be dragged like straight to hell. Because
like, I'll go on Reddit afterwards.
Because I have like, I have a 13-year-old daughter, and it's like, I'm not against fillers. I've had blepharoplasty. We've talked about this before we jumped on the air. Like I'm all about interventions, but that's just such a mentality that like forcing young people to overdo it because they're not willing to go smaller, to minimize, to give a natural look and accept less money is just kind of evil.
I think and you have to think about if you're doing that many syringes, your body's having like a kind of like an inflammatory response to it, right?
Wow.
With all of that, it's pulling in water, things can migrate then. So I will usually, if I have a mature patient over 60 that has a lot of volume loss, fine. If we're going to go temples, cheeks, mid-cheek, nasolabial, jowls, that will end up being like 4 or 5 syringes. And that's like usually where I cut it off.
Wow.
Yeah. It seems like a lot, but it's like each one is a blueberry size.
No, I just mean
like
that's so much less than 7.
exactly.
And you're doing it on a young person. That just puts in perspective.
Exactly. I'll send you the page.
Yes. Perfect.
Okay, guys.
Well, one thing that I wanted to touch on that I think has kind of exploded in the last 5 to 7 years is the topic of filler being dissolved. And people kind of talk about it flippantly almost like, oh, I'm just going to get my lips dissolved. I've heard of so many adverse reactions. I heard it hurts like hell, and people are treating it like it's like taking off makeup, and it's not, and it's not. There's no way to guarantee that you're getting 100% of it out of your body either, right? So can you talk about that?
Yeah, great question. I dissolve a lot of filler in my practice. I'm kind of known to do that. I have like I think I have like 20 vials of Hylenex, which is like hyaluronidase. Also, you can only dissolve the filler that is hyaluronic acid based. Thankfully, most filler is that, but for instance, like Radius or Sculptra, they're not hyaluronic acid based. So I've heard of horror stories of someone getting their jawline snatched. And of course, on Instagram, you see that it's so nice and sharp on this end because they did the angle there. And then you look from the front and they are just out like this. Well, guess what? Yes, it will dissolve over like 18 months, maybe, but not all of it because those also stimulate collagen. So it's a really sad thing that people really need to know. If I'm going in getting filler, is this dissolvable? Because I also see a lot of patients from like overseas that get like silicone or something like that done, or they don't know what they got done, and I'm dissolving and it's not going away.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So in regards to getting filler removed, I think that it's not as scary. Of course, a very small population of people can be allergic to it. And I think that I don't personally do patch testing because I use a brand that doesn't have that potential allergen. I think it's like bovine or something. But so I use one that has like very little allergic reaction. It does burn for sure. I think people need to understand that number one, putting in the filler should be a very like precise thing. You're going in micro droplets, but then when you're dissolving, it's not like X amount of dissolving fluid dissolves this much of filler, right? You're kind of going in and flushing the area. And then we also have
so you need more dissolvent.
It's like
sorry, wrong word, but
it's like comes in units. Weirdly, I know that's so confusing because it's not Botox units or anything. And we say Botox, but we call it
neuromodulators.
Exactly.
Yes.
So when it comes to dissolving, we go in and I basically flood the area. Are there people that I absolutely think that need filler dissolved? Yes. And the most common areas are the under eye area, where they've had patients had filler there like 3 years ago. Of course, that lymphatic drainage is obstructed because that filler is holding on there. So your body's not able to get rid of like foreign substances as it's able to. So that's why people see a lot of swelling there, and it pulls in water, and that skin is so thin. So that's where we get into issues of the under eye. And then lips. I think that when lip filler came out, everyone was like, fill. And then they got this like perception drift where they didn't realize how big their lips were, and it started migrating. And then they realized, okay, wait, I don't like how this looks, especially from the side, because they didn't have anyone to cut them off. And I think this is really where the providers should stop patients. And I do that all the time in my office. And also, if things really swell, it can migrate. The thing with dissolving filler is it will not get back to exactly where things were before, right? So for instance, if I have a patient coming in and they're like, I just want that nice crisp border, Dr. Sheila, like you do your patients, and they have like, don't have that right now. It's like very thick and I guess duck shape look. So the thing is, I'll go in, I'll dissolve. And also I never make them feel bad about dissolving, because it's really, sometimes it's not on them. It's their provider, right? So I never shame them or anything. I go in, I dissolve. It usually takes 1 to 3 sessions to dissolve. It does burn. It will swell. But it kind of just feels like getting the lip filler done. It's just like the product burns. So it's not a fun process, but I agree. People are kind of nonchalant about it. It may take a few sessions. And then you also have to wait a couple months to let that skin heal, because a lot of the issues that I see is that people will dissolve their lip. They'll go somewhere, they'll get the lip dissolved, and then they'll come back in a week and they'll refill it. Well, guess what? It's just going to migrate again. You're not going to get that really nice border because that skin integrity is compromised.
Good point.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, lots going on there. You definitely want to go back and listen to the beginning of our episode when we talked about finding a good provider. Now, one of the things that I've noticed, using fillers to create structure and almost mimic the look of plastic surgery. I actually went to a session on this on Restylane Shape. So this is mainly for chin augmentation, and it's just been approved by Health Canada earlier this year before the FDA. So I imagine it will
That happens a lot.
Oh, does it? Okay. I didn't know
We're
that.
behind. Europe and Canada get stuff approved way earlier.
Okay. So there's a hint at what might be coming to the US soon-ish.
Yeah.
So this is interesting because from my understanding, it's a denser version. This is now, Restylane has 3 different versions of their product. This is the most dense that you can get. So what are your thoughts? Because when we talk about it sitting around, when we talk about migration, I wonder how this applies.
Yeah. So I love Restylane products and I use them a lot. Do I think Shape is going to add something that we don't already have? And maybe they will kill me, but I think it's comparable to Allergan Volux, you know, or I think it can be comparable to something like Radiesse, but also stimulates collagen. So I don't think it's revolutionary in that way. And the problem with that is just because it's FDA approved doesn't mean that everyone's a suitable candidate.
Right.
Me personally, if I have someone that's a little softer, like a female patient who wants a little chin augmentation, I'm not going to go in like with something that's so hard and non-dynamic on their chin. I'm going to actually use Restylane Define. You know, it's a product that's like strong, but still is a little bit more flexible because I think that looks a little bit more natural in the chin area. Again, that's me as an injector. Everyone's so different with how they inject and what they like to inject with. But I think that when it comes down to your injector, they should be able to have all of these different ones, and they should know for you specifically this. Because my patients will ask me, like, what are you using? And they'll ask me during the consult. I'm like, oh, I haven't even, like, I need to use, like, my brain. I need to, like, look at your face. And, you know, or they'll have, like, Alley points, which are not, like, a thing anymore for Allergan. And I tell them.
You mean, like, loyalty points?
Yes, loyalty points.
Interesting.
They'll have loyalty points for a company. And they'll only want me to use that company. And I'm like, I will, but it's not, like, I will tell you, it's not the first thing I would pick for this area. Will you still have great results? Yes, but it's not like my favorite thing. So we get into a lot of issues with sausage lips, duck lips, because people are using fillers that are so structurally supportive but doesn't have flexibility, so you don't have those natural
you look good
movements.
In a picture.
Exactly.
but don't talk.
Don't talk. Or the under eye or the mid cheek, when you see people in the nasolabial, if something thick is put in there, you can tell you need something watery, you need something more flexible.
When it starts going
it's just
convex, that's what I notice sometimes on the big screen with celebrities, and I'm just like,
yes
it still needs to, like, we really have to obliterate it that much that is actually convex. That's not right.
You know what happens with that? That's an
what
injector,
is that?
and that's a patient who thinks that filler lifts. And they might filler doesn't technically lift. It does lift to a certain degree because we have fat pads in the aging process that fall with time, and then we have bone that's resorbed. So to a certain degree, adding a little bit of filler will lift the face because it's just adding a little volume there. But at a certain point, like after one syringe, it's just going to add volume, and that 3D, it's not going to lift up. It's going to project out, like you said, very like clowny, alien-y. And that's where people aren't looking natural because they think they're getting that lift when really maybe they need a facelift, or maybe they need some energy-based devices to help tighten those deeper structures. And that's where filler has been vilified because it's used improperly.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. I also love that you touched on the cocktailing of these products and ingredients, because I read an article in Elle, and it was like, I think the title was like, do dermatologists have a secret menu? And I was like, click. I need to know what the secret menu. It's like, you know, ordering off the in and out menu when, you know,
the secret menu.
Yeah, the insiders know. If you know, you know. Are people asking you for the secret menu?
You know, they're not, but the derms who know.
Okay.
So when I read that article, it was a really good article. I was like, oh yeah, been there, done that, been there, done that. because it's like the derms who know, or the injectors that know. And it's more advanced technique. I'm not saying that cocktailing is always amazing. One thing that some injectors do that I haven't jumped on the train yet is mixing PRP and filler together.
Oh.
Like literally, I think for me,
like in the same syringe?
In the same syringe. And it just
don't like that.
doesn't.
That sounds weird.
Mayday.
Exactly, Mayday. Because you guys know, especially with like when it comes down to even skincare, you can't mix things together like that.
Yeah.
It'll disrupt the integrity of one of the ingredients. And although I'm not saying that one day I'll do your filler and then in that same area maybe I'll go with PRP or PRF or something, where it's like where you probably know it, but PRP or PRF is where we draw your blood, spin it, take your own growth factors that pull in stem cells that are regenerative and kind of stimulate collagen in a natural sense. This doesn't really add volume, and that's why people add filler in there. But to me, it's actually really funny because I was giving a lecture, and one of the questions someone asked me, they were like, it was an inject. I was like teaching people how I do under eye filler. And this is an area where a lot of people do PRP and filler.
Yeah.
And then some lady she raised her hand and asked me questions. She's like, well, what's your protocol on PRP and filler? And I'm like, I don't do that. And it was like, everyone was like, oh my gosh, you know, like
shockwaves.
Because I think that's a little more trendy, and that's a cocktail that I think that isn't amazing. But I think that cocktails that are great are hyperdilute Radiesse, which is diluting down this one type of filler called Radiesse, which is calcium hydroxyapatite, that stimulates collagen, and fanning that into the neck, fanning into that lower face area. It's very similar and comparable to something like Sculptra, which is great. And I know it gets bad rep, but I feel like it's like coming back now and everyone's like talking about it again, because these are injectables that Sculptra comes in a powder form. You dilute it down and it becomes a liquid, and you inject that into the face. I don't know if you guys have that. You must have that in
Sculptra?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then we have Radiesse, which is a thick filler, one of the highest density fillers. And we dilute that down, but that means we get a little bit of volume and mostly that stimulation of collagen. So I think this is kind of the future, is utilizing those aspects into injectables. And then of course there's always like little things that we can do with Botox. Like you said, like, are there like big trends, or do you think, has your viewpoint changed on anything? And I think we're just getting smarter with like, ooh, where can we apply Botox or Xeomin or whatever? We're applying it to the nose, and things are more trendy, whereas like the trap tox for a while and things like that. And I will do that for patients, but not everyone needs that. Masseter tox, people got it. Everyone got it. People who shouldn't have gotten it, and now people hate it. So it's like, not everyone.
Why do they hate it?
Well, because decreasing that bulk. So for like my mature patients, and even for myself, I saw it too. But if you do too much, so masseters are like big chewing muscle on the side there, and it can get really bulky on some people that genetically have like TMJ type issues, where it's a muscle that you're working out, you're grinding at night, and it becomes really bulky, and it can cause a very like wide face. So people want a slim face in the aesthetic purposes. So we go in, we do Botox or neuromodulator in that area to kind of decrease the activity a little bit, almost like we're not completely paralyzing it because you need it to eat, but we basically decrease it. But if you're decreasing that bulk that's holding the side of your face up, there's a risk of jowling in that area.
Oh, I see.
So a lot of people started getting it too frequently, and they started to see jowls. Even myself, I kind of like am a guinea pig for myself. So I got my masseter. I did my own masseters, and I was like, oh, looks amazing. And then I was like, in my head, I was like, my masseters are growing again. And it was like, usually I like to do it every year. This was probably like 6 months later, not even. Like, let me just go in again. And I did it, and I noticed that structure that's holding up the side of the face, which is so important when it comes down to aging, decrease that structure, and I got a little jowling there
between your chin and your ear. That's so interesting. I feel like dentists hate to see you coming, because they were making a lot of money telling everybody they needed it.
Exactly.
It became this like thing in a very prevalent practice in a lot of dentists' office. I saw it myself on menus there, and I was like, I just don't know if this is where I want to be getting my Botox, or the provider I want to be getting my Botox from.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if it's someone, if you don't care about the aesthetics or whatever, and you have severe TMJ, you want to somehow maybe if it's covered that way.
Yeah.
And that person really knows what they're doing. They didn't just take like a weekend course. Because I mean, of course, they know how to inject and things, but the anatomy, the problem with the masseter tox is there's a muscle called resource right in front of it. So a lot of the issues I've seen are people accidentally inject that muscle, so you can't even smile. So there's just like, so you do so many, you like put way too many units in there, so you can't even smile or chew. It becomes an issue when things that are like benign and great go out of hand, and then it becomes like not great, you know?
Yeah, I just think it's that thing there, like everything you do has an opposite, like, what is that?
Trade-off?
Yeah, like trade-off chain reaction. It's like if I get my coin slot on my forehead injected, I do get a little more wrinkling up here. Or you see it telltale on the housewives. They get the bunny wrinkles on the side of their nose. It's like, you can see it a mile away. So your face is still going to try to move.
Exactly.
And you may get a wrinkle or a pocket of, unwanted kind of jowling elsewhere. Yeah.
Our final question is, what are 3 skincare trends, topics, and ingredients that you think will be front and center in 2025?
Okay. Well, I think peptides, we kind of touched on this, but I think a lot of companies are working on the research behind it. And because retinols are not tolerated by all, I'm not saying peptides are going to completely replace retinoids, but I think that if the technology gets to the point where it's like the head-to-head studies show similar things, then I definitely see products that are like combining the two, and I already do see that. But I think that peptides are going to really, really stand out with the technology, and people are going to learn more about them. I think that skincare, like microbiome in skincare, it's been touched on a little bit, but I think that that's going to be something that is going to be even more so touched on, because everyone's skin is so different, and with the increase in like perioral dermatitis and rosacea and acne, we need to really balance our skin. And then everyone's just using like hypochlorous acid all the time, like, that's going to disrupt our skin microbiome.
Right.
And then the other thing is going to be just like regenerative aesthetics, right? Where, for instance, we have like injectable skincare in a sort. One being kind of that cocktail where it's called Aqua Gold is one of the brand names. So it is basically like little gold mini micro needles that you don't need to be really numbed for it. They don't go very deep, and basically it's called mesoderm, where it only goes on the top layer of the skin, a little bit deeper where like the oil glands are. And I can put Botox in there to help with redness and decrease the pore size and oiliness. I can put vitamin C, tranexamic acid in there to help decrease the pigmentation. I can put a little filler in there to help with like the fine lines without adding too much. And then you have, I call it injectable skincare. It's called Volite, which you guys have had for a really long time. For us, it's Skin Vive, where it's like hyaluronic acid, but it's almost like so watery, and that's going to help. It helps like the aquaporins and really on like that skin level where it hydrates the skin. So I think this is where like skincare and aesthetic procedures are going to really mesh.
And that one, if I'm not mistaken, is just like more superficially injected.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not, it doesn't have the same longevity maybe, but
correct.
Yeah,
they say like 6 months or something.
Right.
And because it's not going super deep, I don't think you have, I mean, there's always a risk of anything, right? Where it can react to old filler, you can get nodules, but it's not going so deep into those compartments in your face where it's obstructing that lymphatic drainage. So I think that's one good aspect of it. Those, salmon sperm facial was everywhere. And that's really because of that ingredient, polydeoxyribonucleotides, the PDRN, which are like the building blocks of DNA, almost like similar to peptides. And I think that's going to be really huge. Kind of, again, yeah, I do, because it's already in some skincare. They just like don't talk about it. And I personally think that's like more like Botox in a bottle type thing. But I think PDRN and a lot of stuff is coming from like South Korea, and they're just like so ahead. You know?
Love that. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Sheila. This has been so informative, and we are going to do a pod swap where we're on Derm Approved. So everybody go check that out. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh,
Thank
of
you.
course. You guys are awesome.